Overwatch is a game full of interesting characters, whether it's through their gameplay, through their story, and maybe a mixture of the two. Overwatch's niche and just the competitive gaming market in general is that it melds these characters and story along with its competitive journey, and every character feels unique from one another, and they feel worthwhile, and they feel like they should be here. They're pretty well realized. Except for one, in my opinion. That one is Ashe. Now, why do I think Ashe is not on the level of other characters? Well, to me, Ashe has always felt like she doesn't have a place in the grand scope of Overwatch. It kind of feels like she was an addition that was, a pretty easy, pretty simple DPS, and everything surrounding her just doesn't quite feel as in-depth or as intuitive as I think the designers and the character writers all wanted her to be. So I'm going to go through a couple of my complaints with Ashe and then basically go, how can we fix her? Obviously she's here. Overwatch is never going to remove a character at this point. So how do we get Ashe into a state where it feels like she really does belong and she has her own niche, whether it is through character or gameplay or whatnot? So, basically, one of the big things with Ashe, it feels like, is that she doesn't have a niche at all in her gameplay. So, a lot of characters are either, super niche, or they're the one character that does things in the game. Like, Lucio has the speed boost that he gives his team. He's the only character who can consistently do that. Or, there's characters that do a lot, like Tracer. She's super high mobility, but the way that her abilities are thrown together, she feels super unique, and there's a lot you can do with her. Think Sojourn, think Doomfist, Not necessarily abilities that are completely alone, they aren't completely unique, but when you put them together, they feel unique. Ashe is similar, but I don't think that kind of comes together great. She's a mid-range sniper, and we already had Hanzo, but she's like the hit scan version of Hanzo. So what does she bring to the table that Hanzo doesn't? Well, she's got Dynamite, which is just this big AoE burn, damage over time ability, and then her movement option is Coach Gun. And both of these abilities, they just kind of feel a little underbaked, a little underwhelming. To me, Coach Gun, you can basically only ever use it to reposition yourself. Using it to get people off of you is very, very, very niche. Just because it's on a pretty long cooldown. Dynamite, it's like this big brawl disruption, do a big AoE and some damage beforehand. But it's also on a pretty long cooldown. And so most of the time your gameplay just goes into shooting the hit scan gun. And plenty of characters are hit scan. Widow is the long range sniper, but she actually can one shot by herself. Ashe doesn't have that. Or, Haas, he shoots all the time, but he's really tanky, and he's got some bigger playmaking potential with his nade. And, his general gameplay loop, you also have, the roll in there to reload and all of that. Ashe just kind of, it feels like most of the time, you're just shooting regularly, and every 10 seconds or so you use an ability, and that just isn't really fun. Not being able to use your mobility outside of just defense, it's just not as fun. Ashe just doesn't have that level of play. Even Widow Grapple. Widow Grapple, you can go for cool jump shots. I feel like if you do that on Ashe, you just maybe hit someone's head and you don't kill them, and it's just not really worth it. Also, her ult is, again, just a really simple ability. You throw Bob and he goes and does his own thing. So her ult is just not as fun to use either. There's just a lot of things about Ashe where she just isn't as engaging. I think a lot of her abilities, they're cool on paper, but in practice you're just kind of limited and you don't really have that niche. So yeah, the gameplay design is simple, but I just don't think it lends itself to really interesting design or situations. And there's plenty of other sniper characters, Hanzo, Sojourn, Ana, Widow. They all do something else, unique or have a niche or anything. And Ashe is just kind of the middle ground, like the basic sniper. And that's where my problems are with her gameplay. And the real reason I really don't like Ashe is not really to do with her gameplay. It's to do with her story and her lore. I am not the biggest lore head out there, but I do know most things about the characters. And, to me, a lot of Overwatch characters have these really interesting backstories, and then those backstories then they go and they interact with characters in the real world, and it's like those backstories define how they interact with other characters, and that's how the story progresses, as narratives and everything are written, character arcs, etc. My problem with Ashe is that, think about Cassidy. Cassidy has the background in the Deadlock gang, and then they take him, from Overwatch, goes, hey, you're a bad dude. We're going to give you an out. You're going to be on Blackwatch. Then he does Blackwatch for a little bit. It goes bad. And then he just kind of becomes an outlaw, and he's wandering. And he gets Overwatch back together for Overwatch 2, and he gets new recruits, okay? That is like 3 different groups of people that Cass associates with. He's got the Deadlock gang, he's got the original Overwatch team and Blackwatch, and then he has the new blood of Overwatch. Cass is so involved in everything, and not every character needs to be as involved in Cass, but he exists outside of just one part of the story. He has plenty of interactions with so many different characters because, he's just everywhere and he knows so many people. And even the people he doesn't know exactly through his lore and his story, he still has these quick little, quips with. To me, it feels like Ashe only has quips with people. Ashe is a part of the Deadlock gang and is like an adversary of Cass. And that's kind of it. And honestly, I really don't like Ashe's narrative design because she feels like she exists only to make Cass's story stronger. Instead of having her own, development and reason to exist in the Overwatch universe. She does have some characterization with, I think her parents were rich and she had everything she wanted, but she was neglected by them or something, and that's the way she is. But that's kind of it. I mean, she's just like a bad guy, like a neutral bad guy. She's not like evil like Talon. She's just like a bandit that Cass has beef with. And I find it really I don't know, I'm off put by the fact that, the male cowboy gets this big whole story to himself. He gets to exist outside of that space, and he's got all this to him. And then the girl cowboy is just that. In fact, she exists to make the guy's story better, to just be like a really static character, and basically just, honestly, she feels a lot like the female Cass. Like, she is the foil to Cass, of just like, if Cass never shaped his act up, they'd just be riding together and they'd be really similar. And that does have merit, but the fact that Ashe doesn't have her story arc of her own, or any relation outside of the Deadlock gang and Cass, I don't like that. I feel like that's just such wasted potential with this character who, is sassy and has a lot of things to say and has a certain view of the world. But all of that is just kind of condensed down to little quips that she has with other characters, and she just says one-liners a lot of the time. And her character, it just feels so static, so boring. So that's kind of my problems with Ashe. It's just she feels like she doesn't have a reason to be in this cast other than they just felt like they designed another sniper and they fit something together with her and put a little bow on it back in 2018 and shipped it out the door. So basically, how can we make her more interesting? Well, I just talked about the lore, so let's go ahead and continue that train of thought. I think the easiest thing that you can do, Ashe is like a smuggler and, just kind of trying to make a buck where anywhere meets, make ends meet anywhere. Why does Ashe not have any sort of ties to other organizations, like the shadier operations, the Junkers, Vishkar, Talon. You know, if her Deadlock gang was somehow supplying them or doing raids under the hood, you know, for Talon, or maybe Vishkar is like hires them to do certain things, you know, I feel like that would be much more interesting, and then it opens up new opportunities for Ashe to associate with other members of the cast. You know, obviously she could talk to everybody in Talon about actual lore things. If it were with the Junkers, you know, I feel like they'd be like a weird kind of half get along. There'd be some great opportunities there. If it's with Vishkar, she could have stuff with Lucio and Symmetra and Lifeweaver. You know, like there's plenty of things here. Now I feel like the fact that she is like a smuggler, like in a gang, she runs this big operation. Like there's so much you can do with that I feel like they've left out on the table for like 5+ years at this point. And I think the specific thing that I really want out of Ashe is that I want there to be more interactions that do not involve Cass whatsoever. There are plenty of voice lines in this game where Ashe says something and somebody references Cass, or she references Cass, and you hear them a lot, and then really subconsciously you think like, oh, this character only exists because of Cass. If she had more lines with other people, you know, like basically like, it's kind of silly to say, it was like Overwatch's Bechdel test, basically. Like if she had more lines that did not involve him in any capacity, then I feel like she'd be much more interesting, and then you wouldn't feel that. She would feel much more fleshed out, or like a character with her own merits and goals. Also, you know, some kind of development with her character arc outside of her, like, backstory, you know? Like, I don't know who Ashe is nowadays other than just kind of, like, the hothead, sassy counterpart to Cass. You know, like, what can she learn? Like, how can she change? You know, I think a lot of characters in Overwatch 2 are starting to, like, develop a little more as Overwatch comes back together, but since that doesn't matter to Ashe at all, she can't develop in the same way. And I don't want it to be her looking at like, oh, look how far Cass has gone, like, what am I? No. So, yeah, she's a very flat personality, and I really do want them to give her some kind of extra pizzazz to her lore. I think they could do it. I think the opportunities are there. It doesn't have to be crazy. It can be totally just plain. It can just be like, hey, now she works with Talon. Now she knows Talon. And that's just plenty to work with. Just something extra. And then let's go ahead. We'll cycle back to her gameplay, which I don't think is as bad. But, you know, Ashe is very hard to find to be meta because other characters typically do her job better, or they do more things more consistently. Ashe, you know, she's always reloading, it feels like, and that's kind of a problem too, I think, with their core game plan. But some suggestions I have, in the April Fool's update, they gave Ashe an ability where she had, I think it was Fred, but it was basically Bob came out a short distance and knocked somebody up close to her, and then she could line up a shot. I feel like that's a much more, like, engaging and cool opportunity for her. You know, just like some kind of like different ability that gives her a niche. Like she's a sniper, but also she has a get off me tool and a knock up in case, you know, she wants to set her or her team up for success. Other than just having to always get away, like maybe you could use that to hold your ground more often and even get a kill out of it. I feel like that would be way more engaging. And a pretty cool idea. Of course, you could have to replace Bob after that because you don't want him on an ability and then the ult, and then like it doesn't really make sense. You couldn't be able to use the ability while he's out during the ult, but you know, I want her to have some kind of engaging ult, something that, you know, maybe it's just like an ability she throws out, but something that's a little more just like, just put Bob out and forget about it. I want it to be more engaging for the time that it's up. Something that she can play around with. Honestly, I don't have any ideas right now. I'd love to hear what you guys think. But then also, like, maybe, like, another mode of fire or another thing to shoot would go a long way for her general moment-to-moment gameplay. I like the idea of being able to shoot at the dynamite, but also, like, this mode of fire is pretty worthless. And it's mainly just for, like, follow-up after you hit a headshot at long range like that. And I feel like Ash's moment to moment, she's just kind of scoped down and then looks around and then has to reload for a million years. So giving her some kind of other ability that can interact and is up more often, again, like another thing to shoot. Maybe I think it's stealing from I think Mortal Kombat. I think this character, what's his name in Mortal Kombat? I can't remember. Like throwing a coin up into the air and then shooting the coin and the bullet like ricochets or something. I don't know how you would implement that, but just something like that. So we're like, you're not just constantly shooting the enemy. Your gameplay loop revolves around you firing things and then shooting those and those doing different effects. I believe that's so cool. It plays into that like Western gunner aesthetic, Wild West cowboy stuff, that complements Cass but doesn't overbear him. Aaron Black, thank you so much, Tom. Classic. So yeah, that's Ashe. Like she can exist in the game. She's perfectly fine. She's a competent DPS, but she's always outclassed. She always feels a little like boring to pick compared to all the other characters that do her job. Her lore is just a little underwhelming, and she's probably, honestly, she may be the least fleshed out character in the whole game. I know some of you Zenyatta lore heads or something may beg to differ, but to me, Ashe has nothing, really nothing to set her apart from a lot of the other characters in the game. So I definitely think there's a lot more that they could do with this character. They just kind of have to be willing to and put the effort in, and maybe people will like her more. I totally forgot to mention this, but also she has like one of the lowest amount of Overwatch 2 skins. Like it feels like she's been forgotten in that part too. So she doesn't even have any like cool fun skins. Like got like this Space Ranger Star Wars hat or skin on right now, but other than that, it's just like a couple epics, I'm pretty sure. So anyways, that's my thoughts on Ashe. If you guys liked this discussion, I do them live every time, or I do one every time I go live on twitch.tv/LaneHemingway. If you want to watch any more of my discussions here on my YouTube, all my other socials are down below. If you wouldn't mind doing all that great YouTube stuff, like, comment, subscribe, etc., it really helps me out. I really appreciate it. And thank you for watching. I hope you have a good day.